I never really believed in that cliché of you'll just know. That gut feeling people talk about when they meet the person they're meant to be with. I always thought it was romantic nonsense. Then I met Leah. I was 26 at the time, just getting my footing in residential contracting. I had been working for a larger outfit but recently struck out on my own with a beat-up truck, a rusted toolbox, and a few loyal clients who trusted me enough to give me a shot. Life was all work and not much else, until one of my high school buddies dragged me to his sister's engagement party. That's where I met her. Leah wasn't loud or flashy. She was sitting on the back steps with a drink in her hand and her shoes off, laughing quietly with a friend. Something about how relaxed she looked caught my eye. When we finally got introduced, she stood up, wiped her hands on her jeans, and gave me this confident, curious look, like she was already trying to figure out who I really was. We ended up talking the entire night. She was smart in a way that wasn't performative, she just knew things. She was a graphic designer working at a mid-sized marketing firm in the city. She loved documentaries, hated cilantro, and had a weird obsession with watching thunderstorms roll in from the porch. We were opposites in a lot of ways. She was thoughtful and precise. I was direct and hands-on, but that contrast felt easy. It felt balanced. After that night, we started seeing each other almost every weekend. Then weekdays. Then weeknights. Within a few months, she had a drawer at my place. Within the year, we were talking about moving in together. It all happened fast, but not in a reckless way. It just felt right. We got married 2 years later in a small outdoor ceremony. Nothing too elaborate. Just close friends, family, good food, and a dance floor under a string of lights. She wore a simple dress that caught the wind just enough to make her look like something out of a dream. I remember standing there thinking, this is the easiest decision I've ever made. The years that followed were full. Not always flashy, not without hard work, but full. We bought a modest split-level home in a quiet neighborhood. I kept building the business, and she eventually shifted into freelancing so she could work from home. That gave her the freedom she wanted, and when our daughter Ellie was born, it made everything even better. Ellie changed our lives in all the best ways. She was this impossibly small, wrinkly thing who somehow became the center of our world overnight. She's 9 now, sharp as a tack, funny, and already more curious than I ever was at that age. She's got Leah's eyes and her intensity, but she inherited my tendency to ask too many questions. Watching Leah become a mother made me fall in love with her all over again. Our life was built on steady habits. Morning routines, shared grocery lists, bedtime stories. We weren't flashy. We didn't take lavish vacations. But our home was warm. Lived in. Ours. From the outside looking in, I think we seemed like a couple who figured it out early and never let go. And for a long time, that's exactly what I believed. Think there's something underrated about stability. Not the kind that feels rigid or boring, but the kind that comes from truly knowing someone. After the whirlwind of early romance passed, that's what Leah and I had. Stability. Our life was made of routines that worked for us. Things didn't always run perfectly, but we were consistent. We communicated, we adapted, and we found ways to support each other through the mundane and the meaningful. Every weekday had its rhythm. I'd be out the door by 6:30 most mornings, coffee in a travel mug, boots already dirty before the sun cleared the trees. Leah and Ellie would usually still be in pajamas when I left, breakfast bowls half-filled on the counter, the cartoon intro music humming in the background. Leah handled mornings like a pro, packed lunches, morning hair battles, the never-ending search for clean socks. By the time I got home around 5 or 6, the house would usually be calm again. Ellie would be finishing up homework, Leah at her desk editing a layout or taking a video call with a client. We always made time to eat together, even if dinner was just leftovers or takeout. That part mattered to us. Weekends were slower, softer. Ellie usually crawled into bed with us early on Saturdays, dragging her stuffed bear and asking questions no one should have to answer before coffee. We'd make pancakes, go for walks around the neighborhood, maybe take a drive out to her favorite playground. Leah always packed snacks and wipes, even if we were just 10 minutes from home. She thought of everything. I loved watching the two of them together. Ellie adored her mom. She copied everything Leah did, brushed her toy doll's hair the same way, pretended to take calls on a fake phone, asked me if I thought her drawings were client-ready. They had their own little rituals, movie nights with popcorn and face masks, dance parties while folding laundry, matching socks that never stayed matched for long. Sometimes I'd come home to find the two of them baking something completely unnecessary, a batch of cookies just because it was raining, or cupcakes in the middle of July because we had extra frosting. Leah wasn't a perfectionist, but she liked things done her way. It worked for us. I handled the messes, the repairs, the noisy parts of life. She handled the texture, the quiet order, the little details that made our home feel alive. Our marriage wasn't about constant excitement. It was about steadiness, trust. We each had our lanes, and we stayed in them without having to say so. I wasn't always great at expressing things emotionally, but Leah seemed to get that. When I fixed the leaky faucet or cleaned the gutters without being asked, that was how I showed love. And when she left little notes in my lunchbox or texted me a reminder to take a break, that was how she showed hers. We had a few close friends, some family nearby, and the kind of social life that came in waves. Birthday parties, backyard BBQs, school functions. Nothing too hectic. Just enough to feel connected without ever feeling crowded. Most nights, we ended up on the couch with something streaming and Ellie asleep down the hall. It might not sound thrilling, but for me, it was the life I'd always hoped for, built piece by piece, with someone I trusted beside me, and our daughter growing up in a house filled with warmth. Looking back, I think that's what makes everything that followed so hard to wrap my head around. But at this point in the story, I still believed we were solid. One of the things I always appreciated about our life was how much of it was unremarkable, in the best way. We didn't need grand gestures to feel close. Some of my favorite memories with Leah were built in the in-between moments, late-night grocery runs where we ended up in the snack aisle arguing over chips, or sitting on the back deck in silence while cicadas hummed around us and the dog snored by our feet. There was a certain kind of ease between us, especially in the years after Ellie turned 5. The toddler chaos had settled, the work-life balance had mostly found its groove, and we'd both started to feel like we could breathe again. We had more time for small things, family game nights, bike rides, lazy mornings where we didn't feel like we were racing the clock. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. I had built up a loyal client base with the contracting business, and Leah was doing well freelancing for a few local companies and one big client out of Chicago. We took a few vacations, nothing extravagant, but they meant something to us. A beach rental in Florida where Ellie buried all her flip-flops in the sand and forgot where. A cabin in Tennessee with a hot tub that never really got hot. A weekend trip to a lake where Leah insisted we rent paddleboards and ended up tipping us both into the water. We laughed about that one for weeks. I trusted Leah completely. She was organized, attentive, and maybe a little intense when it came to managing schedules, but I liked that about her. She handled all the birthday gifts, the school emails, the dentist appointments. I always told people, if it wasn't for her, I'd be living in a tool shed somewhere eating frozen pizza with my kid in mismatched socks. And it was true. She kept the whole thing running, and I loved her for it. We didn't talk about love every day, but we showed it in gestures, in patience, in the way we looked at each other when Ellie did something funny or surprisingly grown up. When we went to bed at night, there was always a kiss goodnight, a shoulder brush, a see you in the morning. It wasn't fiery or dramatic. It was just us. Comfortable. Safe. Ellie brought a softness out of Leah that I hadn't seen in the early days of our relationship. She'd get down on the floor to draw with her, narrate entire stories for her stuffed animals, sing songs in the car with a kind of enthusiasm that didn't care about being on key. I remember one night when Ellie had a nightmare, and Leah stayed up with her until 2 in the morning building a safe fort out of couch cushions and fairy lights. She fell asleep in there with her, arms wrapped around her like she was still a baby. I watched from the hallway for a moment that night and thought, I married a good woman. We're building something solid. And that's the thing, I never questioned it. Never once did it cross my mind that something could be going on beneath the surface. That Leah, the same woman who packed Ellie's lunch with heart-shaped PB&Js, who laughed at my terrible impressions, who kissed my temple every morning as I laced up my work boots, could be hiding anything from me. At this point in my life, I was content. Proud, even. I had a wife I admired, a daughter I adored, and a quiet rhythm I didn't want to change. And if someone had told me that just a few weeks later, everything I thought I knew would be flipped inside out, I would have laughed. It started with little things, things you could ignore if you wanted to. Leah had always been somewhat private. She wasn't one of those people glued to her phone, but she did spend a lot of time on it for work, client messages, edits, meeting follow-ups. That was nothing new. But lately, she'd started taking her phone with her everywhere. Even just walking from the kitchen to the laundry room. It used to sit face up on the counter. Now it was always screened down, always tucked away quickly when I walked in the room. I told myself it was nothing. People get habits. Maybe she was just tired of distractions. Still, I noticed. We'd be sitting on the couch watching something, and she'd glance at her phone and suddenly excuse herself to go check something. I assumed it was a client. That's what she always said. But it started happening more often, always with the same rhythm. Look down, smile faintly, get up and leave the room. A few minutes later, she'd come back with an apology and say, "Sorry, just wrapping something up." One night, I half joked, "Your clients must be in love with you if they're still texting you at 10 p.m. She laughed, too loud, too quick, and said, "Well, you married someone in demand." Then she changed the subject. I didn't push, but something else started nagging at me. Her mood shifted, subtly but noticeably. She was either overly cheerful, like she was trying to prove everything was fine, or distant in this detached, floaty way, like she was somewhere else mentally, even when we were together. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd give these short, vague answers. Busy, frustrating, fine, and then she'd scroll through her phone while I talked. When I brought it up, casually, not confrontational, she just said, "Sorry, I'm wiped. I'll be more present tomorrow." That word, present, stuck in my head. It sounded rehearsed. There was one afternoon that really stayed with me. I came home early from a job that got canceled last minute. I walked into the house expecting to surprise her and maybe grab a late lunch together. But she wasn't in the kitchen or her office. I found her in the backyard, sitting on the patio with her phone in her lap and this half smile on her face. When she saw me, she jumped a little, like I'd startled her. I asked what she was watching. She said, "Oh, nothing, just a dumb video on Instagram." Then she locked the screen and slipped the phone into her hoodie pocket. It wasn't the act itself that bothered me. It was the way her voice sounded. Light, casual, but just slightly off. Like she was trying to control the moment too tightly. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't seeing all of her. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Leah had never given me a real reason not to trust her, and I wasn't the type to snoop or pry. But something was different. I couldn't name it. Couldn't point to any single thing that proved I was right to feel uneasy. But the feeling stayed, like a faint draft in a closed room. Something cold you can't find the source of, but you feel it all the same. I told myself it was stress, that we were both just tired, that marriages go through phases, and this was just a quiet stretch. But I'd be lying if I said the thought didn't cross my mind. What if she's hiding something? It's a strange thing, realizing that you're starting to feel like a guest in your own marriage. For a while, I tried to chalk everything up to stress. Leah had a couple big freelance contracts that were taking up more of her time. Ellie had a school project that required late-night help. I'd been working long hours myself. Spring always hits hard in construction, and we hadn't had a real conversation in what felt like weeks. But even so, there was something else in the air. Something unspoken. Leah and I used to check in throughout the day. Not obsessively, just little messages here and there, a meme, a "how's it going?" a picture of the dog sleeping in some ridiculous position. But lately, she'd stopped texting during work hours almost entirely. If I messaged her, I'd get a dry busy or a thumbs up. Sometimes nothing at all until after dinner. Again, not proof of anything. Just unusual for her. And when she was home, it wasn't much better. Her attention felt divided, like she was constantly half listening. She started going to bed before me more often, claiming she was exhausted, or saying she needed uninterrupted time to finish design work. At first, I didn't think much of it. I respected her focus, but eventually I started to notice that these work sessions never seemed to result in anything she showed me. One night I asked, "What are you working on?" She replied, "Just a branding project." I said, "Cool, what kind of business?" She paused too long before answering. "A coffee shop startup," she said. Then she immediately changed the subject. The next day, I glanced at her desk out of habit while she was in the shower. No sketches, no mood boards, just a locked laptop and a clean notepad. Nothing out of place, but nothing there, either. It's not like I expected to monitor her work, but it struck me how secretive it had started to feel. Like her whole world was taking place in a room I no longer had a key to. Another thing I noticed, her clothes. Leah had always taken care of herself, but lately, she was going out in outfits that didn't match where she said she was going. A tight dress for a casual coffee meeting. Heels and full makeup for a supposed run to Target. One Saturday morning, she left for errands and came back 4 hours later without a single shopping bag. When I asked if she found what she needed, she said, "Oh, I forgot to grab most of it. I'll go again tomorrow." I nodded. I didn't question it out loud, but in my head, the pieces were starting to stack. Not neatly, not into a clear picture, just a pile of oddities I couldn't ignore. We were still doing the usual stuff, making dinner, watching shows, helping Ellie with her homework, but it all felt like going through the motions. There was a kind of emotional delay in everything Leah said or did, like she was translating her words before speaking them, filtering her face before showing it to me. One night, I reached across the couch and took her hand. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said, "Yeah, just tired." Same line as always. Then she pulled her hand back to check her phone. She kept that thing close now. Never left it in her room unattended. Never charged it in the kitchen like she used to. It was always in her pocket, her purse, her hand, like it was attached to her. And I still told myself, maybe it's nothing. But that voice inside me, the one I'd been ignoring, had started to whisper a little louder. Something was off. There's something strange about watching a person you love slowly become unfamiliar. It doesn't happen all at once, not like flipping a switch, but more like sunlight disappearing behind thick clouds. You don't notice right away. But then one day you realize the light's gone, and you're standing in a place that doesn't feel like home anymore. That's how things felt with Leah. I kept trying to convince myself we were just in a rough patch. Every couple has them, right? Especially after nearly a decade together, raising a kid, managing work and bills, and all the daily stress that builds without asking permission. Maybe she was just burned out. Maybe I was too. That's what I told myself, over and over. But it was getting harder to believe. We weren't talking like we used to. Not really. We still spoke, of course, about groceries, about Ellie's school projects, about schedules and plans. But the connective tissue was gone. The easy laughter, the check-ins just to ask how the other was doing. That spark that once lived between us felt dimmed. I started to feel like I was talking around Leah, not to her. I caught myself watching her more than I interacted with her. Not in a jealous or suspicious way, at least not at first, but like I was studying someone I didn't quite recognize. Her posture had changed. Her energy was more guarded. She smiled less at home, and more when she was heading out the door. And when she did smile around me, it often felt like a performance, like she was pressing play on something familiar just long enough to keep me from asking questions. There were also the increasingly frequent late client meetings. She'd leave after dinner, dressed a little nicer than she needed to be for someone sitting behind a laptop. She'd come back hours later, smelling faintly of a perfume she never used to wear, always with the same line, "Sorry, they ran long." Sometimes she brought home a coffee cup or leftover takeout, as if to say, "See, I was where I said I'd be." But it started to feel staged, like a set piece in a play I wasn't invited to act in. One night, I decided to surprise her by picking up dessert from her favorite bakery. It wasn't far from where she said she was meeting her client, so I thought I'd stop by afterward, just to drop it off at home as a kind gesture. When I texted her that I was nearby, she didn't reply. Not for 45 minutes. Then finally, "Sorry, in the middle of something, heading home soon." When she walked in later, she was chipper, overly so, and acted like she hadn't seen my message at all. I didn't press. But the silence between us kept stretching. Even Ellie had picked up on it. Kids know. They always know. She'd started asking if we were okay in that soft, hesitant voice she used when she didn't want to cause trouble. I told her everything was fine. And I believed it in the way you believe a dream that's already falling apart by the time you wake up. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want to worry either. There were still good moments, family dinners, movie nights where Leah sat between us with a blanket over her legs, her fingers running gently through Ellie's hair while we watched something animated and forgettable. And in those moments, I would almost forget the rest. I'd let myself believe that everything was okay, that maybe this was just a long winter, and spring was waiting just around the corner. But then Leah would check her phone again. Always that phone. Always that subtle shift in her eyes when it lit up. And I'd feel it again, like we weren't really three people on a couch anymore. Like I was the only one fully present in the room. And maybe, deep down, I already knew what that meant. I just didn't want to know. Leah's birthday was coming up in a week, and I thought, maybe foolishly, that it might be a way to reconnect. I started planning a small surprise party. Nothing extravagant, just something intimate. A dinner with a few of our closest friends, Ellie helping with decorations, a small cake from the same place we got our wedding cupcakes from. I wanted to remind her that we were still us, even if things had felt distant lately. She didn't seem excited when I mentioned wanting to do something. She brushed it off, said she wasn't in the mood for anything big this year. Maybe just a quiet night in, she told me. Work's been draining lately. But I caught the way her eyes shifted when she said it, like she was rehearsing the line instead of sharing a feeling. I told her we didn't have to do anything if she wasn't up for it, but part of me couldn't shake the idea that something didn't add up. Still, I went ahead with the plan, just a few friends, some food, nothing formal. Ellie helped me wrap a small gift, a necklace Leah had saved in her browser months ago, something she'd probably forgotten I saw. I found it one evening when I borrowed her laptop to pay a bill, and I remembered thinking how delicate it looked, simple, like her. It felt like the right gesture. Thoughtful. Meaningful. In the days leading up to her birthday, Leah was more distracted than ever. She spent long hours in her office with the door closed, and if I knocked, she'd answer with a clipped, "Just a minute," followed by silence and the shuffling of papers. Her phone was never far from her hand. If she left the room, it went with her. If she stepped into the shower, it was face down on the sink counter. I started noticing she'd turn off the notifications too, like she didn't want anything lighting up while I was nearby. I'd be lying if I said I didn't start imagining things. But even then, I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was planning something of her own for her birthday. Maybe she was struggling with something she didn't know how to talk about. I didn't want to accuse her of anything. I didn't even want to think the word cheating, not out loud, not even in my head. It felt like touching a live wire. If I let myself go there, even for a second, I didn't know what it would do to me. We still had moments that felt real. Leah tucking Ellie into bed and whispering some bedtime joke that made her laugh so hard she had to get up and pee. Leah resting her head on my shoulder during a show, though her body felt stiff, not relaxed like it used to. Even the way she looked at me sometimes, like she was searching for something. Or maybe bracing for something. The night before her birthday, I stood in the garage alone, staring at the wrapped box with the necklace inside and feeling like I didn't recognize my own life. I had never felt so close to someone and so far away at the same time. Like we were actors in a play we both used to believe in, but were now just performing for the sake of the audience. Ellie was excited for the party. She made a birthday card out of construction paper and glitter glue, drawing 3 stick figures, me, Leah, and her, all holding hands under a crooked sun. She showed it to me with pride. "She's going to love it," she said. And I nodded, smiled, tried to believe that. I had no idea what was coming the next day. No idea what would be said in the car. No idea that a single innocent question from my daughter would unravel everything I thought I knew. Leah's birthday morning started like most others. Ellie woke up excited, bouncing around the house in her mismatched socks and carefully holding the card she'd made. She made me promise, twice, that she could be the one to hand it to her mom first. I said of course. Leah, for her part, was still sleeping when we came into the bedroom with a small tray of breakfast and a single candle stuck into a muffin. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes, smiled like she meant it, and kissed Ellie on the forehead. Then me. For a moment, things felt normal. That feeling didn't last. The plan was to take Leah out to lunch, just the 3 of us, then bring her back home for the surprise dinner with a few friends. Simple. She got dressed in a soft blue blouse and jeans, put on makeup she rarely wore anymore, and curled her hair in a way she hadn't done in months. I remember thinking, she looks beautiful today. And for a second, I let myself believe we were okay, that maybe things were turning around. We loaded into the car, Leah in the passenger seat, Ellie behind us, singing along softly to the music coming from the speakers. About 10 minutes into the drive, as we were passing a gas station, Ellie asked something that didn't register right away. "Daddy, why does Mom have 2 phones?" Leah stiffened slightly in her seat, but I didn't catch it at first. I laughed a little, glancing at Ellie in the rearview mirror. "2 phones? What do you mean?" She shrugged like it was the simplest thing in the world. "She has her normal phone, the one she always uses. But there's another one. A little black one." I saw it under her side of the bed when I dropped my pencil. I felt something cold run through me. I looked at Leah. She didn't say anything, just stared out the window, jaw tight. My heart started pounding, and I kept my voice calm for Ellie's sake. "When did you see it?" "Last week," Ellie said. "It was buzzing, and I thought it was hers, but it looked different. It didn't have a case. I asked Mom, but she said it was just her old one and not to touch it." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. The car felt like it had turned into a vacuum. My hands were suddenly slick on the wheel. I glanced at Leah again, still silent, still staring ahead. I made a quick turn at the next intersection. Leah finally spoke. Where are we going? Back home, I said, keeping my voice level. Ryan, come on, we have a lunch reservation. I cut her off. Is there another phone? She didn't answer. Just sat there, stone-faced, eyes narrowing like she was deciding how to spend the moment. Ellie, I said gently, can you go up to your room for a few minutes when we get back? I need to talk to Mom about something. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart. Not at all. When we got back to the house, Leah tried to head to the kitchen, but I stopped her with one word. Phone. She looked at me, her lips parting slightly, as if she might say something. But instead, she turned and walked into the bedroom. I followed. She hesitated at the edge of the bed, then slowly reached down and pulled something from underneath the second phone. Small. No case. I recognized it immediately as something I hadn't seen before. She handed it to me with a look I'll never forget, something between defiance and dread. I sat down at the foot of the bed and turned it on. No password. The home screen blinked to life, and what I saw first was the notification bar, several unread messages. A folder on the home screen labeled Media. I opened it. There were videos. Dozens. And pictures. Messages. Names I didn't recognize. Faces I didn't want to. Footage. Explicit, graphic, and unmistakable. My wife. My wife on camera. With other men. Some of it timestamped just weeks ago. I didn't speak. I didn't yell. I just stared, each tap confirming what my gut had feared but never dared to say out loud. When I finally looked up at her, Leah said nothing. She didn't cry. Didn't beg. She just stood there, arms crossed, like she'd already made peace with whatever came next. I stood up, walked out of the room, past Ellie's door, into the hallway where everything felt heavy and slow. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just betrayal. This was something she had built and hidden. And it was over. I didn't sleep that night. After Leah handed me the second phone and I saw what was on it, what she had recorded, saved, and hidden, I went numb. Not angry. Not broken. Just quiet. Detached. Like my body was running on autopilot while my brain shut everything else down. I walked through the house like a stranger, barely noticing the time, the cold hardwood beneath my feet, or the faint sound of Ellie breathing softly in her room. The only thing I could hear was the hum of that second phone in my hand. It felt heavy, like it was filled with more than just videos and texts. It was filled with answers, the ones I never wanted but now couldn't unsee. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at that phone, then at the life I had built with this woman. Our framed wedding photo was still hanging on the wall above the breakfast nook. I hadn't noticed it in months, maybe years. Now it felt like a joke. Two smiling people in formal clothes, arms wrapped around each other, swearing promises that one of us never intended to keep. I wanted to smash it, but I didn't. Instead, I stood up, pulled out a sheet of paper, and wrote 3 simple words in black ink. I know everything. I placed the note next to the second phone on the kitchen island. Then I began packing. I didn't make a scene. I didn't rage or throw things. That would have made it easier for her to paint me as the unstable one. No, I was surgical. I packed 2 suitcases for Ellie and me, just the essentials, and loaded them into my truck. I took our documents, important papers, and both sets of keys to the cars. The house, the bank accounts, the vehicles, everything that had both our names on it. I went through it all in a matter of hours. By the time Leah woke up and walked into the kitchen, we were already gone. I didn't wait for a confrontation. There was nothing left to say. What she had done wasn't a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was a hidden life, a second world she maintained while I played the loyal husband and full-time father. The worst part? She didn't even try to deny it. That look she gave me when I found the phone wasn't guilt. It was cold resignation, as if she was just waiting for the moment the lie would unravel. She knew it would eventually. She just didn't expect it from our daughter. I transferred the remaining funds out of our joint accounts that morning, not out of spite, but because I knew better than to leave anything tied to her. I'd earned that money. I'd supported our family while she lived a double life. I left just enough to cover the next mortgage payment. Call it generous or call it foolish, I didn't want to make her life hell. I just wanted to disappear from it. That afternoon, I booked an extended stay at a furnished rental 2 towns over. Small place. Clean. Nothing fancy. But it had 2 bedrooms and a little fenced-in yard where Ellie could play. I told her we were going on a trip, that we needed some time just the 2 of us. She didn't ask many questions. Maybe she sensed more than I thought. Kids are sharper than we give them credit for. Leah called me 9 times that day. I didn't answer a single one. She texted me, emailed me, even sent voice messages crying and begging me to talk to her. All of it ignored. That silence was the only language I had left to speak in. I wasn't interested in explanations, apologies, or whatever excuse she'd try to twist into something forgivable. Some choices erase every other word you've ever said. And what I saw on that phone, there was no coming back from that. I told Ellie I loved her. I made her pancakes that night, the way Leah used to. I let her fall asleep on my chest watching an old cartoon we'd seen 100 times. And when she asked me quietly, "Are we going home soon?" I just held her closer and said, "Not yet, sweetheart. We're gonna be okay." Because that was the truth. We were gone. And I wasn't going back. Starting over doesn't come with a map. There's no manual that tells you how to wake up one morning and no longer live the life you built over a decade. No checklist for how to untangle yourself from the routines, the shared memories, the people who used to feel like home. All I knew, in the weeks after we left, was that I needed to keep moving forward. For Ellie. For me. The first few days in the rental were quiet, almost eerily so. Ellie asked questions in short bursts, usually at bedtime. Why did we leave? When are we going back? Is Mom mad? I answered gently but honestly. I told her that some things had changed and that we were going to be living in a different place for a while. I told her I loved her, that none of this was her fault, that she was safe. It became our routine, just the two of us. I'd take her to school in the morning, work my job sites during the day, pick her up in the afternoon, and cook something simple for dinner, mac and cheese, grilled cheese, pasta, whatever I could manage. On weekends, we explored local parks, got donuts from a little shop we found, or watched old movies under a pile of blankets. I let her sleep in my bed more nights than not. She needed the comfort. I did too. I hadn't planned on meeting anyone. Honestly, I was still raw. Wounded in a way that didn't always show but felt like it lived under my skin. I was trying to rebuild a version of life that made sense again. Then I met Erin. She wasn't someone I pursued. It started simply. She worked at one of the local coffee shops I stopped in after school drop-off. I didn't even notice her the first couple of times. But one morning, I forgot Ellie's lunch on the counter and doubled back, flustered and sleep-deprived. Erin handed me a coffee on the house and said, "Looks like you're running on fumes." We talked. First about nothing, then about something. Over a couple of weeks, the conversation stretched. She asked about my work. I asked about her side business designing pottery. She had this calming presence, warm, grounded, not in a hurry. When she learned I was recently separated, she didn't pry. Just nodded, like she knew not to rush someone learning how to breathe again. Eventually, I told her more. Not everything, but enough. And she listened, really listened, without judgment or that nervous pity some people offer when they don't know what else to say. There was no agenda with her. No urgency. Just kindness. And that was something I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Ellie liked her too. They bonded over baking of all things. Erin brought over cinnamon rolls one Saturday, and by the end of the morning, the two of them were covered in flour and giggling like they'd known each other for years. Watching them together did something to me, something I hadn't felt in months. Maybe even longer. It wasn't about forgetting Leah, or pretending none of it happened. It was about making room for something after. After betrayal. After the hurt. After the silence. Erin didn't replace anything. She just reminded me that I was still capable of being seen, of being known, of being okay. And slowly, life started to feel less like survival and more like living. Leah still tried to reach out. I never responded. I didn't block her. I didn't want to pretend she didn't exist. But I didn't engage either. I didn't need to hear her explanations, her regret, her attempts at rewriting the story. I had already read the truth, frame by frame, in the file she left behind. I didn't need closure. I needed peace. And for the first time in a long time, I could feel it coming. The last message Leah ever sent me came 2 months after I left. It was a long one, almost a letter, buried in a text. She said she was sorry, that she had made mistakes she didn't understand until it was too late, that she never wanted to hurt me, never meant for Ellie to be caught in the middle. She said she hoped one day I could forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine, so I wouldn't carry the weight of bitterness around for the rest of my life. I read it once. Didn't respond. I've never read it again. I think that's the part people don't talk about enough. The way healing isn't about dramatic closure or final confrontations. Sometimes it's about choosing silence. Choosing not to engage. Choosing your peace over their explanation. It's been almost a year now. Ellie and I have found our rhythm. She's thriving in her new school, made a couple close friends, and started taking art classes at the community center. Her room's covered in paper stars and taped up drawings, and she's finally sleeping through the night again. Every so often, she still asks about her mom. I answer gently, honestly, but with care. I don't speak poorly of Leah. I just tell Ellie what she needs to know, that sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people, and that doesn't mean it's her fault. And that no matter what, she is loved. By me. Fully. Erin is still in our lives. Slowly, steadily, she became more than a friend. It didn't happen all at once, and I didn't rush into it. I was scared, to be honest. Scared of opening up again, of letting someone close. But she never asked for anything I couldn't give. She just showed up, patient, present, consistent. She loved Ellie without effort, and respected the space I needed without taking it personally. We're building something. Something different than what I had with Leah. Less flashy, maybe, but more honest, more grounded. There are no perfect days, but there are good ones. Enough good ones to matter. Sometimes I still think about that moment in the car, Ellie asking her question, not knowing it would change everything. The clarity of that moment still echoes. I don't know if she'll remember it years from now, but I will. Not because of the betrayal it revealed, but because of the light it turned on. I had been living in a version of life where I mistook routine for connection. I thought if everything looked fine from the outside, it was fine. But you can't build a life on surface. It has to have depth, honesty, presence. Leah made her choices. I made mine. I don't hate her. I don't love her either, not anymore. What I feel is distance. Not cold or angry. Just far away, like a memory that stopped belonging to me. And that's okay. The man I was a year ago would never have believed he could start over. Would never have imagined being a single dad in a new town with a new woman, healing in his own quiet way. But here I am. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm running from something. I feel like I'm finally heading towards something real.